And I am going to mute myself. Okay, here we go.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the MBA Women International webinar, Negotiation, the Advantage of Being a Woman, presented by Karen Hough. We will have a question and answer session following the presentation, so if you would like to write your questions in the question bar of your panel, we will read them afterwards, and Karen will be able to answer them. Karen Hough is the founder and CEO of ImprovEdge. She is the author of the Improvisation Edge, Secrets to Building Trust and Radical Collaboration at Work. Her book was a #1 bestseller on Amazon and also made the top 25 business books on 800 CEO Read. ImprovEdge received the Silver Stevie International Award for Most Innovative Company of the Year 2012 for Women in Business and the Athena PowerLink Award for Outstanding Woman-Owned Business and is a certified women's business enterprise. Karen's first life was as a professional improviser and actor. She trained with Chicago Second City, did over 100 theatrical productions, was featured in radio, TV, and film. She lived a second life as a successful executive in IT for network engineering startups. She finally became an entrepreneur. ImprovEdge has a presence in 6 cities nationwide and a client list including ESPN, JP Morgan, Ohio Health, Turner Broadcasting, Coach, and Nationwide Insurance. Karen is a graduate of Yale University and La Sorbonne Paris 4. She serves on several boards and is deeply committed to volunteer activities. Karen lives with her husband and 3 children in Ohio. And now I'd like to hand it over to Karen to begin the presentation.
Hey, Hannah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So how are you feeling today?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So for everyone that's on the line, Hannah and I are going to be interacting because, as you probably heard, the basis of my company is improvisation. And I was lucky enough to be very involved in improvisation on the theatrical side, but I also feel like it really applies to life and certainly to situations where we negotiate. And improvisation is really about thinking on your feet and handling whatever comes to you. So we're going to be modeling that a little bit together, and Hannah has agreed to be my willing helper and subject. So she definitely doesn't know what's coming next, but I think we're going to do a great job. Yes?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go on and talk about what our day is about. This entire area of work, negotiation and women, came about because the Bar Association asked ImprovEdge to create a training for them. So, you know, we're so lucky. We're in 6 cities. We work nationwide and internationally. And this was a new challenge. This was many years ago, and we hadn't really addressed negotiation. So I started out, as I always do, with research. And I talked to professors. I read a lot of books. I was able to do focus groups and interviews with some of the most incredible experts in my region. It was really, really enlightening. And during the time that we were putting this together for attorneys, we found so much information around how people behave and the interesting things that occur that simply aren't addressed. And what also came out was how there are serious differences between how women approach the table and how men approach the table. And today I want to talk about some of the things that we found during that research and that we've worked on for, oh gosh, over 7 years now, almost 8 years, in looking at what are the things that get in women's way from sort of a cultural standpoint, and what are some of the things that really make us better that we can hopefully leverage in those situations. So we're going to be looking at that. And also, hopefully, you'll be able to pick up some tips. And this is for you whether you are negotiating a $1 million contract or if you are negotiating bedtime for a 4-year-old. And I really feel like many of those things are in common. So we'll be looking at all sorts of different situations. Now, let's just get right into the meat of the situation and talk about some of the drawbacks and issues that we as women encounter. So the first mistake, the most glaring and problematic mistake for women, is that we don't negotiate. So Hannah, I'm just going to sort of turn it to you and ask you, what do you think this might mean? How does it strike you upon reading? Oh, I think she might be muted.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. So as you think about we don't negotiate, and just off the top of your head, what do you think that might mean?
I think it probably means that as a group, women tend to accept things at face value rather than attempt to negotiate them or change them.
Perfect. That's exactly it. You can't ever get to the negotiation table if you don't actually walk toward it. So let me give you an example. Suppose that you go to the grocery store and there's a big sign and it's Friday, okay? And you have to do all of your shopping. You're having a big party that weekend. You've got to do the shopping for your family for the whole next week. You have to buy a lot of meat. So you walk over to the meat department and there's a big sign there that says, all meat on sale Saturday, 20% off. What do you think is the first thing that women think they have to do if they're going to get that 20% off?
Purchase meat?
True, exactly. They have to purchase meat. And I'll tell you, the first answer that comes out of many women's mouths when I say this is, I have to come back tomorrow. So you're there on Friday, and it says the sale starts Saturday. So what all of us do is we think, oh, I have no options. I have to follow the rules. I have to come back tomorrow, even if it's terribly inconvenient for me. But the truth of the matter is, all you have to do is walk up to the manager of the meat department and say, you know what, I'm a great person that shops here a great deal. I invest a lot in this grocery store. Can you give me the discount today? What's the worst thing he could say?
Probably that you just have to come back tomorrow.
Right. The worst thing he could say is no. But what might he say?
Might say, sure. Thanks for asking.
He might say, sure. Exactly. He might say, absolutely. Come on over. I'll give that to you now. And in millions of ways, we simply don't take advantage of asking those questions or entering into a negotiation situation. As you said, we simply take things at face value. Now let's dig a little bit deeper here. One of the books I want to recommend to everyone on the line is Women Don't Ask. It's by Sarah LaChevre and Linda Babcock. It is incredible. It's a very well-researched piece of work, and it digs into what our issues are and where they came from, so I highly recommend it. There's a scenario that they talk about in the very beginning of the book, which I think illuminates a lot of the issues here. Let's go back to the very first job you ever got right out of college. Now, it can be out of undergraduate, it can be out of graduate, but there was a point where we all got our very first job. And the glaring difference here is that across the board, the base difference between women's starting salaries and men's starting salaries is an average of $4,000. So if you think about how this compounds over time, even if there were no more differences, for example, if the spread didn't become wider and wider, which, by the way, it does. We all know that men earn much more than we do. The difference here is that women, over the course of their careers, leave about $500,000 on the table. And that can happen from the very time that you enter the job market. Now, let's talk about the behaviors that make this happen, okay? So a woman coming out of college has great skills. She's done internships. She's a perfect candidate for a certain kind of job. So she goes, she interviews, they love her, they come back to her and say, you're wonderful. We want to offer you this job for $30,000. And what does a woman say? Hannah, I hope you're still on. Well, what's the first thing she says? It's this job market, it's the economy's bad. They say, here's your first job, we're offering you $30,000. What do you think she says?
She probably says, great, thank you, I'll take it.
Yes, yes, that's it. We say, thank you, wonderful, great, I'll take it. I'm so excited. Can I start tomorrow? Which is a very common answer. And the difference here is that a young man coming out of exactly the same school with the same skills, the same capabilities, will be offered that same amount by the same HR person. And what he'll say is, oh, wonderful, I'm so glad for the offer. Thank you for the job. Listen, I've done my research, and in this arena, in this work, I understand that people make as much as $35,000. I'd like to make $35,000. Well, the HR person goes back and looks at her bands and looks at what she's allowed to offer, and she realizes that she can actually offer him as far as 34. He might have asked a little more, but she really wants this talent. She wants him on board. She wants him happy. So she goes back and says, you know what, it's within my power to offer you 34. How about that? And he says, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll take it. And that's where the differences begin. Because he asked for it, because they talked about it and negotiated, he starts out at a $4,000 higher level than the woman. Now, there's also a distinction I want to make here. I want us to not think about, HR or hiring groups or companies as being bad, quote unquote, in any way, because they're doing their job. They're finding good talent for a good rate, and they're hiring the right people. Now, if a wonderful female talent walks in and doesn't ask for more, then the HR person's thrilled. They're like, wow, I got a great talent at a great price. They're not bad guys. They're doing their job. But I will tell you, I've talked to many recruiters who have said it's heartbreaking. Literally, a woman that was associated with MBA Women International, I was talking to her about this. She said it's literally heartbreaking to talk to women who often have greater skills than some of their other male candidates that they're looking at, who don't ask for anything more, and she has the power to give more. It's not just a matter of money, but sometimes men ask for things like, well, I have a family. I really want 3 weeks of vacation instead of 2. That might be what they negotiate for. Or they might say, I know you're offering me the base level of benefits here, but I'd like the Cadillac level that you normally get after you've been here for 3 years. Can you give me that? I'm not asking for more money, but give me that. So the point is that we have to enter into those slightly uncomfortable spaces. And there are unusual things that hold us back from there. There are things like we think, oh, it's my first job. If I ask for more money, they'll think I'm bad, or they'll think I'm demanding, and they won't like me. And that's the self-talk that can start to get into your head that can keep you from going after things that really are definitely within the realm of what you can have. So the fact that we don't negotiate is the #1 most glaring, most problematic issue for women as a gender. So Hannah, before I move on, I'm just going to ask you, do you have any questions about this before we move on, or shall we look at #2?
I don't have any questions. I think we can move to #2.
Okay, great. Let's move on. All right, mistake #2. We negotiate against ourselves. What do you think this means? Any guesses, Hannah?
This one's a little bit more confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we are harsher critics of what we think our capabilities will be, so we limit.
Look there, since you are in the same place as our headquarters, I have taken 10%
You're already offering discounts without even giving the proposal, and you're not really evaluating
of money. And I found out after doing this work for over a year and meeting all their demands that they were paying another vendor 3 times as much and thought that it was perfectly fair. So they were getting me for a steal. And a lot of this comes from the fact that we simply don't do enough of the research that is incredibly important for us to do. Taking something off the top before you even begin. which means I didn't ask questions. I didn't talk about the money before I walked in there. Really, we shouldn't walk in with proposals or asks until we ask the people we're working with. We're saying, what is your budget? What is your timeline? What are you working with here? What do you think you can spend? What did you spend last year? What's going to be really optimal for you? What are your restrictions? What's going on with your company? The more information you have, the better negotiator you can be and the more collaborative negotiator that you can be. So let me tell you, one of the things I did in combating this So what I did is I created some relationships, and I went to a really well-known law firm, and I said, look, I want to create a deal that's going to be mutually beneficial. I'm going to give you one of my workshops absolutely free. However, what I need to have is the managing partner of your firm in the room for the entire experience, okay? Then, if you feel that there's value and you really enjoy the workshop and you got a great deal out of it for your firm and your people, I need you to buy at least one more for full price. And no matter what happens, whether you like it or hate it or anything in between, I get the right to use your name on my client list. Now, I got that deal. I saw that I was willing to set boundaries that would create value for me. And what happened is that then I continued to work with that law firm for years after that. I got the next deal and the next deal and the next deal. So I did take a calculated risk, but I had to understand not to break down what was going to create value for me as well. Okay? All right, so let's go on, and we're going to move to mistake number. I've had the pleasure of working with and meeting women who have closed $23 million deals, $50 million deals, et cetera, for their companies. They are tough, they are informed, they are ready, and yet when they have to go in and ask about their promotions, their benefits, their raises, they feel utterly at a loss. And I also have to feel a great deal of empathy there, because when I was negotiating for technology companies when I was in IT, I was that same woman. But as soon as I became an entrepreneur, I horrendously undervalued my services, partly because I think we're worried that we're not going to provide enough value. And we also are worried that we're not going to prove our worth. There's a lot of social stuff wrapped up in here. There's an incredible firm that I work with, and I want to tell you a story about this. They were trying to look at promoting women into higher positions, and they were trying to figure out, why aren't we getting more women into higher positions? This is actually a firm. It's not a law firm, but it's a professional services firm. It's global. And they really understood that they had to get more women into higher positions. They needed that talent. They didn't want to keep losing them at the senior manager, and they wanted more women in partnerships. So they said, we've got to look at everything. And they literally went down to the level of detail of looking at their partner applications. And these are the differences that they started to reveal. A woman's partner application sounded something like this. I hope that if I work very hard, you might consider me for partnership if I take all the talking about other people. They didn't really support. A deal to learn from our male counterparts, a lot that we can benefit from. We just have to realize that we've got to start standing up and speaking for ourselves and understanding our value and asking for it. It is uncomfortable and it's hard at first, but then you start to really be seen for the worth that you provide. And that's incredibly important in this arena. So those are the three major mistakes that we're going to focus on this evening. And Hannah, before we move on to the next section, I just want to ask, do any of these sound familiar to you?
Yes, they sound very familiar.
Yeah. Have you ever run into the situation where you just had that drop in the stomach, or how does it relate to you?
I think the idea of undervaluing seems really familiar. And I always think probably people want to exceed expectations rather than fall short, so much easier to undervalue. So.
Yeah, and women are wonderful about wanting to exceed expectations. The interesting aspect here, too, to think about, or the interesting point, I should say, is that men believe they should be promoted based on their potential, and women feel they should only be promoted based on their capability. So, for example, if a job description says MBA required, a woman won't apply for it unless she has her MBA. Whereas a man will say, you know, I've got a year under my belt of my MBA, or I have so much experience, it's like an MBA. And they'll go in and they'll talk about that, and very often they will get the job. So, because they believe that they have the potential to fulfill the need. And I think that's part of what I'd love to see more women moving into, is saying, well, I don't have everything I need for this, but I am a great worker, I'm a hard worker, I'm a smart person, and I'm going to figure it out. And I think all of us have landed in stretch situations. And, you know, it's been hard, it's been a real challenge, but we made it. And more, if we're willing to feel that discomfort and move into those situations, more and more we're going to move ahead. So let's just take a moment. We're going to kind of back away from negotiation just for a second, because this is where I really want us to think about a new paradigm as we approach negotiation. We've sort of focused a lot on the negative and maybe what sometimes we're missing or some mistakes that we're making. And the reason I want to bring the lens of improv into this conversation is that it's informed my life, and it is hugely helpful in the world of collaborative negotiation. And collaborative negotiation, by the way, is the best kind of negotiation, because that creates long-term relationships. It creates a way for you to be you know, more effective in getting what you want, and also the other side of the table getting what they want, which creates a very, very strong deal that tends to hang together. So the 4 principles of ImprovEdge came out of the work that we did with the Wharton School of Business at University of Pennsylvania. We did a lot of research with them over many years. They were incredibly generous with access to their professors and their MBA students, and we wanted to look at what are the behaviors that occur on the improvisational stage that also occur in very high-performing corporate leaders and teams. And how can we map those back and forth? How can we be sure that when we use a technique from the improv stage, it will be meaningful, it will be relevant, and it will make a difference in a corporate environment? So that's the testing we did for years before we even started to work with corporations. And the very first concept is yes space. The second is building blocks. The third is team equity. And the last is oops to eureka. Okay? So, Hannah, I showed, oh, great, Kara.
Great. Here, Karen, here's a candle.
That's not a candle.
Are you sure?
It's not a candle.
What is it?
All I know is it's not a candle, Hannah.
Do you
All right, so let's break. Let's break here. Good job. Good job. We always start to giggle at some point. So I first want to tell you that I was being a terrible improv partner, and I want to apologize, but I promise it's for a good point. I promise. So
Okay.
tell me what it was like to be stuck in that scene with me.
A little frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't really sure how to react to it not being a candle, because I was pretty sure it was a candle.
Yeah.
And not knowing what questions to ask or what path to take, I guess, from there.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. That's a beautiful explanation of how that feels. Now, the reason that I said no and I denied sort of what you were trying to do with me is for two reasons. The first is that we have learned in our research, and I will say that most of our research is based on American behavior, so I want to make that disclaimer. A lot of the statistics we use are American-based, is that we tend to respond to new ideas as American adults with negativity because we're not ready for it, we're not comfortable with it. 66% of our emotion words, as a matter of fact, in the English language are negative rather than positive. And the second point I want to make here is that it's a real problem in negotiation, because what it does when there's sort of a positional situation, in other words, I think this, you think the opposite, and that's all we're going to talk about, is really a terribly dead place to go in a negotiation. It gets you stuck. All you're thinking about is, well, I want this, you want the opposite, and that's all we're going to talk about. It creates conflict. It creates deadlocks, and it's not a way to really open up the possibilities of what negotiation can bring. And in improv, a kiss of death, because nothing can happen. So what I want us to do now is I promise I'm going to use all the rules of improv. I'm actually going to use yes space and building blocks. Can we start that scene one more time? Would you try it with me one more time?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, great. Let's go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yes, and I think that you should come to my holiday party.
Perfect. Maybe I'll bring another candle.
Oh, yes, would you bring two? I happen to have
Sure.
2 candlesticks, yes, and we'll have all that delicious pine scent in the house, and you can come over. Bring a friend, too. Oh,
Perfect.
you know what? Yeah, you know what? We can make a candle party. Let's do that.
Great. I think everyone would love some candles for the holidays.
Yes, yes, we can have everybody bring candles. We'll give everybody candles. We'll burn the 2 candles you brought me because the scent will be so beautiful. This is going to be a really cool party.
This is going to be great. I'm excited.
All right, so let's end there. Perfect. So tell me how it felt to be in the scene that time.
It was much better and much friendlier, and felt like you were giving back and forth between the both of us, and actually coming up with new things and more things.
Yeah, we really built a lot. We had candles. We had come up with a party. You were bringing friends.
Yeah.
It could go almost anywhere, don't you think?
Yes, it could.
Yes, yes. So let me tell you what concepts we were using there that come from the improvisational stage. Just in case you didn't know, the art of improvisation is the art form where about 5 or 6 or so actors come on stage. We do not have costumes. We do not have props. We do not have makeup. And we do not have a script. We often don't even have a plan. What we do have is probably about 200 people in the audience, or 20 people in the audience, depending on the venue, and about 2 hours to fill. So it's some of the most incredible work I've ever done. I absolutely love it. And the reason that improvisation can work is because we've all agreed on 2 very important concepts, and they are encapsulated in 2 words, yes and. So the yes is considered yes space. as well and get into the game. So when they say and, they'd say, and I am bringing a candlestick to put it into. And I am going to help you dip some more of these waxy candles, and we're going to start a business together. So they have agreed that they're going to build on my idea. They're going to bring their own block that fits in with my idea, and we're going to build something together. So the reason that this is so related to negotiation comes a great deal. Another book I want to recommend, if you have not seen it, and I'll talk about it again later, is Getting to Yes. It was a wonderful work that was put together by the Harvard Business School. They continue to sort of look at that concept, but it's around getting away from positional negotiation. In other words, that there's only two positions, and that's all we talk about. Collaborative negotiation and Getting to Yes is about understanding what's really going on and what we can build together. Because sometimes in a negotiation, there's actually an answer completely outside of what either of you think. But if you understand what the other's needs are, you can actually find something different that will make everybody happy. And that's where yes space and building blocks comes in. In other words, saying, yes, I understand that you want something I don't, and I'd like to understand why, or I'd like to understand more about where that came from, and understand your needs, and understand what you think the impact will be if you don't get it, for example. So it's a wonderfully relevant concept, and I'll tell you that over the many incredible clients that we've had, it's a great concept for leadership and for teams. So we're going to be looking at that. Now, the last two concepts I want to cover, team equity and Oops to Eureka, also apply. Team equity has a great deal to do with the value of the people in the room. And whenever you negotiate as a team, it's important to understand whose role is what. On the improv stage, we always had to know what the talents were. You know, if we were going to have a good show, we couldn't just have 5 people who looked alike who all were sort of funny. We needed to have somebody who could sing. We had to have somebody who was funny. We had to have somebody who knew about current events. We had to have somebody to be the straight man, you know, so that we had a really strong, diverse team. And team equity is about that. So if you are negotiating as a group, it's important to know, you know, who's good at what, who holds what information, and to always yes and each other. Now, the last concept, Oops to Eureka, is absolutely my favorite because my whole life has been an Oops to Eureka. Oops to Eureka from the improv stage is the point that a lot of things can happen. When you're improvising, things actually go wrong all the time. Things that you don't expect come up. Not necessarily wrong, but certainly unexpected. And I've had people say, you know, if something goes wrong on the improv stage, you just cover it up and nobody knows, right? Wrong. When something happens, everybody knows that you're dealing with a situation. The key is to acknowledge it, to deal with it, and then to make something great out of it, the eureka. As we all know, history is full of examples where something that seemed like it wasn't going to work became something else great. Post-it notes were supposedly a big mistake. Chocolate chip cookies were a big mistake. Ruth Wakeman had sort of chopped up the chocolate. She threw it in thinking that it would melt and become chocolate cookies, but they can't. The client said, hey, you know, those look kind of good. Don't throw away all those good ingredients. We'll try them. Right? So there are many examples of this. And in a negotiation, unexpected things are going to come up. And you can either let it throw you, let it upset you, or you can say, wow, this has totally changed everything around. Now, how am I going to make it a eureka? So I feel like these are concepts that women really understand. They're integrated into our life. They come to me from the improv stage, but they occur all the time. You never know what's going to happen. And the more flexible you are and the more positive you stay, I feel, the more successful you can become. So those are the 4 concepts I wanted to talk about. Let's move on to some of the things that I feel make women incredibly strong in the negotiation arena. And we have to start being better at doing these things. So female advantage number 1 is the fact that we ask questions. We are willing to look a little ignorant sometimes, and we are willing to say things like, gosh, I've never heard about that. Please tell me some more. And that way we start to understand why people are taking the positions that they are. So Hannah, you know, have you ever been in a situation where asking a question really changed the outlook? Or talk to me about what you think of this great advantage.
I can't think of a specific situation right now, but do see where it would be a great advantage, not only to show that you are okay with asking questions and not knowing everything, but also just so you can get a way better understanding of whatever you're talking about, or even of the other person that you're talking to, I suppose.
Yes, that's a great point. And the other person, if you ask questions about them, you build a relationship. Wouldn't you agree?
Certainly.
Yeah. So the fact that we are willing to ask questions, and we are very good questioners too. Now sometimes we have to work on that skill. And by the way, questioning and questioning well insight into who they are. That's incredibly valuable in a negotiation. So I want to tell a little story, and I love this story. I was so fortunate to be in this situation and have this happen. I was working on getting a very large deal for my ensemble and me with a global media client. It was the first deal we were looking at doing with them, and I had incredible advocates in the organization. A lot of them were from HR. They had coached me a lot. But we did have to meet with the CFO of the organization. His group was going to be engaged in the training, and he did have to give the okay. So he really had to approve it. And what I had heard is that, number one, John never talks. I was lucky if I would hear 2 words, and that I would only get about 12 minutes of his attention. So my meeting literally was scheduled, I think it was either 15 or 20 minutes, I can't remember. That's all I had on his calendar. Because if I didn't make my point and get out of there, then he would just leave, literally. So I was certainly nervous, and my advocates were prepping me, and they kept saying, okay, just get in there, present, and get out. And I said, okay, that's fine. So we went in. I met John, very nice man. He said, hello, Karen. So I got my 2 words, and he said, please present. And it occurred to me that I needed to know more. And I said, John, I absolutely will present. I just wanted to ask you a question. If this training could be absolutely perfect and you had the outcomes that you needed from your people, what would those outcomes be? What would it look like? And he talked for 22 minutes. So I learned everything I needed to know. His reputation as being someone who never contributed was because I think people were afraid to ask him a question. And he had a lot to say. He was very opinionated about what he wanted to have happen, about the needs of the organization. And during that time, I learned everything I needed to know. The good news is that I learned that what he wanted was something that we could absolutely deliver. I also learned that the first 10 slides of my 12 slides were useless and wouldn't be relevant for him. So when it did finally come time for me to speak, I was able to go straight to the things that mattered to him, skip out over all the stuff that probably would have bored him in the first place, and really get to the meat of how we could partner together effectively. So, you know, he actually played an improv game with me in the conference room that day, and we were in there for well over 45 minutes. He had them move other meetings on his calendar simply because we started with a question. So the power of those questions is something that I think we need to really think about, and especially at these moments as we think back on those improv principles. When you're about to say, no, that's not going to work, if you can just pause long enough to breathe and think in your head, yes, and say, what an unusual idea, and I need to understand more. Can you tell me more? To ask that question could open up many possibilities. Okay? Let's move on to another advantage here. We prefer agreement over conflict. I feel this is a great advantage of ours. As I said, getting to yes is about collaborative negotiation. And I think I've sort of touched on many of the points why this is important. The key point here is that when you are in a very difficult negotiation, when it's perhaps very emotional, when you are very positional, you know, you want one thing, they want another thing, and never the twain seem to meet, it often creates a terribly conflictual situation. The other thing about a conflictual negotiation, for example, if one person walks out with everything and the other party walks out getting nothing and feeling bitter and upset, there is a very good chance that that deal will fall apart, or they'll come back, or something. There's also the point that if you burn that bridge, you really can't go back and do business with that party again. Now, it's never perfect, but if each group can if they're trying to get you emotional and riled up, it's for a reason usually. It's to put you off of your game and make it an emotional decision. Where someone's body language and what they were actually saying did not line up. And the important thing here is to really think about the fact that, wow, that's not lining up. I don't think they really mean that. On it so that you get upset and the person's face gets red for an instant, and then they sort of take a breath and calm themselves. You could talk yourselves out of it and say, oh, I thought I saw him turn red, but it must have been my imagination. No, if he really did turn red, there's a reason. So the last tips that I'd like to leave everyone with is, having priorities when you walk in is really important. And I cannot stress the importance of preparation enough. It's funny, another fact about improvisation that a lot of people don't know is that improv is actually the most over-rehearsed art form I've ever been involved with. I would rehearse with my improv teams probably 2 to 3 times as much as I ever did even for a Shakespeare play, which takes hours and hours and hours of rehearsal. It's because in improv, you never know what's going to come. You've really got to be prepared for anything. You have to practice formats. You have to know your team. You've got to be ready. And when you come in prepared for any situation, it's really going to set you in a better place because you can stay calm and you don't get emotional. So one of the things you want to prepare is to know your priorities. So if you're going to go buy a car, for example, you might know your gotta have it is that I have to have a car that's $30,000 or under, and I have to have a car that will get at least 25 miles per gallon. So that's non-negotiable. You have to have that, all right? The next thing you might want to think about is the things you want to have that are very, very important to you that you would only give up need to know where all the pieces that you want fall in the priority list because it helps you to decide how to move forward. Another important thing, as you heard in my story about the CFO at the multinational global media firm, is find out what they want. Find out why they're there. Find out what their needs are. Whenever you can, ask those questions. And for women, I feel like always ask for more. Do your research. Find out what your worth is. Don't go in there crazy, you know. Go within the range that you feel is useful, but for heaven's sakes, please don't undervalue yourself. That's so incredibly important. Ask for more. Even if you don't ask for more money, ask for things that are important to you, because it will show that you value yourself, and it will actually make other people value you more as well. So lastly, Hannah, as we sort of wrap up here and move into the question and answer period, the thing I always want to ask the people who participate, whether this is, and by the way, we do negotiation, we do so much different content around executive presence and all sorts of things. We do it in, you know, over a month, over a day, over an hour. What I want to ask you is, was there something today that you recognized, okay? And also, is there something that you feel that you can change? Can you take a step forward? Can you maybe ask the grocer for that percentage off? Because you will get a few butterflies the first time you do it. But if you don't start integrating some of these changes into your everyday life, when you get to a really important place like a salary negotiation or a contract negotiation, you won't be as ready. So which piece can you sort of take a hold of and make a change on? And Hannah, you don't have to tell me what that is if you don't think of it right off the top of your head. But is there anything that comes to mind?
I think just the biggest one would probably just be asking and considering the fact that things aren't set in stone, and even if you ask, the worst that you can do is say is no.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I think that's wonderful. So one of my favorite quotes, we are what we repeatedly do. So to show you some of the things that we have available on our website. The Yes Deck is an awesome product. I had I'm not mistaken, I've heard this concern before, that there are some younger women who might have female bosses or superiors who really had to go through some tough times to get where they are. And this is a difficult interpersonal situation in that I have seen situations where, again, a woman before, you know, when I was in IT, I was the only woman in my position at that level in 3 different companies. That takes a lot. But the key here is not to think that other people have to suffer as well. So one suggestion I would have is to start to sort of improve the relationship with the person that they're having issues with, maybe asking them about their experiences, or sharing with them how things might have changed a little bit for you, or what some of your priorities are, or where you want to go. again, it's about asking those questions and getting to know each other a little bit better. Might soften them somewhat or help them to understand that it's really important to help the people coming behind you.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then another question that we have is this presentation available in soft copy? And I will state really quickly that the recording of the presentation will be available online at mbawomen.org.
Wonderful. So do go to mbawomen.org to hear it again. And also, there is a short article on ImprovEdge.com under Research that talks about the 3 advantages and the 3 pitfalls as well. So if you'd like to see that written up as a short article, it's there.
Great, thank you. Another question, how do you control your feelings if you aren't getting where you would like in a negotiation?
Ah, very important question. Okay, you use all of the poison tactics that you can to keep yourself in control. As soon as you let your emotions take over, you're sunk. So I would prefer that you walk away from a negotiation or just say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, we're not going to be able to complete this today, we have to reschedule, and leave, then stay emotional. So use all the silly tips that you might have heard of. They actually work very well. For example, stand up and go get a drink of water if you need to. Say that you need to use the restroom and get out of the way. Have someone call you at a certain time. If you know it's going to be heated, then schedule someone to ring your phone and look at it and say, oh my gosh, I have to take this, and get out of the room and breathe. Say, I need to talk with my team privately. We're going to step out for a second. Use anything that you need to help yourself. And I'll say number 1 in these situations is really having a breathing technique that you can use. I think a lot of people feel like they have to fill the silence. Another big issue, I think women talk too much sometimes in a negotiation. And for example, if you were to ask me a question and I just nodded my head, that is an interesting way of putting it. Tell me more about what you need to know. What I just did is I took a breath. I turned the question back to them. It will give me time to think and calm down while they keep talking. I think a lot of it is don't feel like you have to react all the time. You have options. You can stop. You can slow it down. You can ask a question. You can leave the room. Okay.
Great advice. Thank you.
You bet.
Another question, how do you reapproach a negotiation that didn't go well initially?
I think, again, I believe a great deal in taking the high road and coming back to someone in a very open way. Again, looking at it as a collaborative opportunity is incredibly important. So to come back and say, you know, I want to thank you for your time before, and I feel that it's important for both of us to understand what we both need and want and to create a situation where we're going to have the best outcomes, right? Because you always want to use language that's going to bring the other person around to your side of the table. So if you say, you know, it was very conflictual last time. I'm so glad to be here with you again, and I'm excited to get to know you better and get to know your company better, for example. So, you know, to opening up this
Quick question while we have you.
All right.
Do you have any tips on negotiation when you're not face-to-face, so on the phone or online?
Yes, yes, I do. For example, if you can Skype, please do. But number 1, if works. You can probably tell I'm smiling right now. The way the other person will respond to you. I guarantee it. So a couple things. You want to stand up, you want to smile, you want to use that tone of voice in a positive way. You also want to think about speaking fairly slowly, and again, it's all the same things as being in person. Ask those questions.
Negotiations with my company where I am significantly underpaid.
Factually. So for example, you need to get the description that your HR generalist uses to hire for that job, okay? And then take that description. I'm sure they have a list of capabilities that you have to have. For example, if they went out to the marketplace to hire for your job, find out exactly what skills and capabilities they're looking for, and then I want you to relate that back to the work that you do. So, for example, if they say that you have to be able to manage a certain kind of technology, then I want you to have in the column right next to it all of your 12 years of experience using that technology, that you are the most experienced person in the company, that you have achieved a certification, for example, in that technology, that you absolutely have that. Another thing you might want to think about doing is going out to the government websites that talk about salaries and experiences so that you have what the government considers that position to be worth, and so that you also know what your company is paying compared to what the government believes that should be worth. And then the last thing, of course, would be, again, I always believe that you should give your company the option to keep you and to do a good job there. Don't do this unless you really, really are interested in last resort, but go out and start looking at other places that might hire you and find out what they would offer. Again, I think that should not be something you bring up in the first meeting, but if you're not getting what you're worth, one way to get it is to start going out and finding out if someone else would hire you. To have another offer in place is a great way to actually stay happy in the job that you're in.
Thanks. And real quick, before we run out of time, do you know what the government website is on salaries?
It is under I have to find out my home, everybody. They go to the Department of Labor, and they have posted positions and capabilities. Standpoint. Okay?
Perfect.
You bet.
Perfect. All right, well, have a great night.
Okay. Good night.
Bye.